Welcome back, George, for the 8th installment of the whole series. And we left off most recently, democracies based on the informed consent of the governed. Do you want to take it off right off the bat?
Yeah. So again, just stating the purpose of why we want to have an objective methodological outlook of what's occurring in Eurasia and why people need an understanding of the history of geopolitical theory. So we already probably been a little bit too redundant there. I'm just trying to make sure that the new viewers have enough information to go forward. So then we get to slide 18.
As
we
you
actually
say,
start to get
new viewers. Let me remind the new viewers that they can all go and check out the playlists that we have with you and all of your talks, in case they want to get.
Yeah, I like to go over what we've covered so people know where to go back and find it. But that you can't always count on the people have watched the prior videos, so then it becomes a little bit redundant. But then if I don't go over it, then people aren't going to know what I'm talking about, and the balance is going to be different for everybody. So what we are going to do here is run straight through what Russia has to do in order to succeed from becoming autarkic. And of course, if they succeed, then that means the United States policy of trying to break away Western Europe from Russia will have failed. And then what are the consequences? Who are going to be the winners and losers? And of course, if more countries start leaving the petrodollar trading system, the demand for it drops and we get inflation here. All right, that's the goal. Then we go into do we go into a recession, a collapse? It can conceivably cause a lot of problems in the West.
Yeah, this is like a global thing that's taking place, and it's affecting everyone on a big scale, and it's happening quietly in the background, and most people are unaware that it's gonna, run into their life basically.
Yeah, can you post the slide set up on your screen? And then we'll get going on this. I mean, I got it up on mine, but so the viewers can see it. And then I'm also gonna, probably, make some grammatical corrections to this or whatever other corrections or what other suggestions people tell me to make on this thing, and we'll get a finalized version out, and I'll throw it on Telegram.
Update it, and you'll update it sooner or later, and then we'll link it along in the Telegram groups, yours and mine. Sure, definitely.
Yeah. Well, do you have the screen up on?
Yeah, it's there.
I'm not seeing it. Hold on a second.
Oh, okay. You couldn't see my.
Okay, now I see it.
You couldn't see my screen. Sorry, my bad. There you go.
All right, got it. All right, so. Yeah, so we want informed consent. Okay, so the question boils down to whether Russia can transition its economy fast enough to make its invasion of Ukraine pay off. I put it in those terms. So Russia, the idea here is Russia knows that they're going to get sanctions. The United States always throws sanctions. The anticipation is going to be that all these different Western companies are going to pull out. But the different Western, you're looking at oil extraction, chemical engineering processes in the refineries and the distribution of oil. You're also talking about the different minerals extraction, mining, and turning them into metals. You're talking about a lot of those different businesses. So in a lot of those instances, the Western companies have been inside Russia, that they've actually trained up the Russian workforce pretty good. So the idea is even if or the anticipation is that when American companies are forced to divest because of sanctions, whether the Russian people can continue operations without the assistance of Western help. And of course, they're going to get help from China. They're going to they've been getting help from Japan in the Sakhalin projects, and then India. Every different kind of company that you have in the West, or even in Japan, or even in, not China, but there's a lot of German companies, American companies, and Japanese and South Korean companies that have manufacturing in India. So now whatever Russia can't get directly from the West, they can just get it indirectly through India. So then how much do sanctions really affect them? Well, yeah, we're already starting to see the answers. All this anticipation of the Russian economy collapsing, they've been making that ever since this thing first started, and it just hasn't happened. So let's get on to it. Slide. Yeah, the picture on the right is the oil and gas pipelines and the different oil and gas fields it comes out of and how it flows into Europe. Just so people, the thicker lines are the higher billions of cubic feet per year, the bigger pipelines. And then there's that's just a major pipeline system, not the individual city grids, obviously. There's other pipelines that show a more dense network of how it actually gets into the home. But people get an idea of here, Russia really was setting up to integrate with Europe. And the more that they set up to integrate with Europe, the more the United States went into a destabilization and interference program. So here, why did Russia attack? To protect its Russian ports and Black Sea Fleet in Crimea, especially protect its pipelines, because the West is using NATO to collect transfer fees and make sure that everybody uses the petrodollar. Also to protect the big mineral and agricultural exports from the Don and Volga rivers that flow through Rostov-on-Don and the Azov Sea, which, if they were blocked in by Crimea going over to Ukraine, the Kerch Strait's very small. It would be really easy to choke off the Russian economy. So there's no way that Russia could possibly allow Crimea to stay in Ukraine and not take it back after the 2014 Maidan Revolution. The takeaway there is the whole reason of the main reason of the 2014 Maidan Revolution was to take over Crimea and to embarrass Russia. So this whole thing about how Russia invaded for no reason and it's unjust and unjustified, and it's such a bunch of nonsense. It was actually anticipated by the Naval War College, and it was done on purpose, and the American public has been told.
And this is
the wrong thing by the mainstream media.
This is all Russian propaganda.
Yeah, of course. Until you look at a map and start looking where the pipelines are in the ports.
Or read some history.
Yeah, or just going through the history of boring academic books to find out that Anglo-American thinkers have been think about this night and day for the last 100 and some odd years. Then all of a sudden it becomes not so much of a surprise. So getting on to the 20, we get to D. The counter strategy is to further, if the West is trying to disintegrate Russia and China and the Central Asian stands, then D, the reverse is going to be to integrate it. If the NATO strategy is to get the oligarchs to collect all the wealth and invest it into Western banks, so that way Russia can't develop, well, then obviously Putin's strategy is going to be the opposite, where they start encouraging the Russian oligarchs to invest and expand their businesses inside Russia, or they start falling out of windows and dying mysteriously in hotel rooms in India and Spain and Portugal and wherever else. That's all been in the news. Yeah, so here, the Clinton administration, foreign direct investment is to get the money out. So then they're going to, if they're not going to do it if they're trying to stop Western foreign direct investment from expropriating capital, then they're going to go in. That means they're going to go into an import substitution program to build their businesses inside of Russia. So that's E. Now let's go to F. Yeah, so if Russia, okay, yeah, the effective A through E would be to turn the unipolar world into a bipolar world. We already talked about the Asian Silk Road Coalition going through Central Asia. Then here you have, this is important. The whole world, against whatever the Washington Post and the New York Times writes and what's on CNN. No, the world leaders are not about to overthrow Putin. They are absolutely sick of the United States regime change, nation building, and regime change destabilization policies. They're actually joining Russia. I keep on throwing in the Indian news and how furious Modi was, and the whole research, the research wing of Indian intelligence, how furious they are at the United States for funding all these different Sunni Wahhabi VEOs since the late 1970s. So the BRICS and the OPEC Arab League nations are all targets of the regime change strategies of the United States. They're sick of it. They're starting to deal with Russia in rubles. More BRICS nations are signing on to the Russian and the Chinese coalitions. So that means more countries just don't care about Western sanctions. They probably feel that they're going to get picked off one by one, so they're going to stick together, hang together rather than hang separately, right? So, yeah, the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the pivot to Ukraine and the increased shelling of the Donbass to induce the Russian invasion, that's all anticipated. The other countries have intelligence operations and military advisors in these areas. Mainstream media may fool the United States public, but other countries have their different ways of getting information, including just watching their own TV shows. So that that it only works inside the United States. Yeah, so Russia and the question of Eurasian autarky, if these countries can combine inside of Russia, then they're more likely they can divorce from the West, they can internally develop. It comes down to the United States has deindustrialized, for so long. In the other video, we talked about Robert Reich's book, New Deals, about resuscitating Chrysler. He was arguing that they need to resuscitate more industries, and that was back in the mid-'80s. Clyde Prestowitz is Trading Places, that the United States is hollowing out and deindustrializing its own economy. We need to stop it. These were big issues during the 80s. The Bush administration was for was for offshoring jobs. Clinton administration didn't stop it. So here you got the United States deindustrializing on one side, and then in Eurasia, you get Russia and China trying to build more internal infrastructure to become immune to Western intervention because of Operation Cyclone in Afghanistan and Central Asia during the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. Then GWAT interference in Afghanistan. They already know it, so they're developing their own bilateral or multilateral institutions, European Economic Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and BRICS. They've been working out for several years to get their own parallel agencies going, cooperation agencies. So then it comes down to H. The success of Russia is based on diminishing the petrodollar by encouraging other countries to defect to an alternative financial platform. And they've already getting countries to do that. Saudi Arabia is supposed to, their 1973 through 75 agreement with Kissinger, Nixon, and then Ford was supposed to Saudi Arabia and OPEC was only supposed to trade in the petrodollar. So Mohammed bin Salman making the decision to also trade in RMB and in rubles is a big deal. He's blatantly leaving the petrodollar. The United States was supposed to also protect Saudi Arabia militarily. With starting to sell oil and natural gas back and forth and refining with Russia and China, Saudi Arabia is starting to make foreign military sales agreements with Russia and China also. So that's a big deal. Going back to dime strategy, diplomatic, infrastructure, military, economic, one thing leads to the other. So the United States has been trying to stop it, but it's actually backfiring, and more countries are defecting. Okay, so if these alternative multilateral organizations become effective, it spells the end of the petrodollar and the global financial trading scheme and the USD as a reserve currency. That has ominous aspects to it. J, the consequences of this would be to send the U.S. into higher levels of inflation and a severe recession, along with other NATO and Western European allies. Let's go to K. India, Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Japan are leaning towards purchasing Russian gas, despite U.S. threatening them with sanctions also. Okay, that was written a while ago. You're in Serbia. You're getting your oil. You're getting your oil and gas through Croatia. I forget correct. The name of the place. It's down near Rijeka.
I'm not. So, I think it's Adria pipeline, and then it comes back. I saw it on one of your maps, but I don't know what the actual pipe that connects us is called.
Yeah, I go through Rijeka all the time. I never make it down to that far of the coast, so I forget that off the top of my head. So, Hungary, Viktor Orban has been at odds with the EU ever since the immigration crisis of 2015, and he's becoming increasingly at odds with them over different things. So, the rumor was, I didn't get a chance to confirm it, too busy doing this research, but there was a discussion on our Telegram channel. I don't know what the extent of the truth is, but they're talking about leaving the EU. It wouldn't surprise me if people are talking about it behind the scenes.
It's all Russian propaganda. Everything is Russian propaganda.
Of course it is.
Everything that you don't hear on BBC and CNN is Russian propaganda by definition.
These books that I talked about here are Russian propaganda.
It was planted in an alternate timeline by Russians who went
Yeah.
back in time and planted those ideas. That's what it was.
Yeah, they put them in my university curriculum.
Yeah.
They're very forward thinking, very devious folks.
Yeah, must be.
So yeah, it's if any one of these countries start to defect, it would probably start leaving to the neighboring countries also defecting. Yeah, since this paper was written in June of 2021, the big test was to see if Germany was going to abandon the U.S. sanctions and purchase Russian oil and Nord Stream gas in a euro-ruble exchange and abandon the petrodollar or face severe economic consequences as their immense industrial base would no longer be viable without cheap, plentiful Russian energy supplies. Yeah, let's go to, we've been looking at that. Well, we had the four COAs that either Russia was going to go out of business or deindustrialized, or going to switch to coal and nuclear. They kind of dragged their feet on both. It looked like they were going to switch over and go ahead and buy in rubles. Then
remind everybody what a COA is. And just because I'm being annoying for the layman, tell us what autarky is for the people who have not seen this word before.
Oh, yeah, it's where you're self-reliant within the country for so the country is fully independent and can operate, independent of its neighbors. It's be purely self-sufficient.
Autonomous, basically, a synonym for autonomous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, autonomous if you're talking about a person, but if you're talking about it, a country as a living organism, you could say that.
All right.
So they'd be just self-sufficient internally, and they have nothing in their supply chains that can be cut off from an adversary.
All right.
So in here, it's not necessarily autarkic between one country. It's autarkic within, Russia and China and the countries in between. All right, so we go to the next one.
Basically the Eurasian continent, let's put it that way.
Yeah. So let's go down to 27. Okay, you have the video on that we did. And the reality is that using much more expensive shipped LNG would more likely leave the German industrial base of cars, motorcycles, trucks, chemicals, building materials, electronics, biomedical equipment, uncompetitively priced in the global markets. Of course, it's not just Germany. I'm talking about the German-speaking world. Also, we discussed whether the United States is trying to reindustrialize as Germany is having an energy crisis right now. Their companies have to relocate to where they already have manufacturing facilities set up. That would be in the United States. Again, we talked about it on our Telegram channel all summer. The way we've been discussing it is in terms of military decision-making process of co-analysis, co-assessment, co-development, co-selection, that whole process. So Germany will move some of its businesses, but the big, the anticipation for the United States is, according to the fake Rand report, was that more companies would move to the United States, then the United States would be reindustrializing to make up for the fact that we reindustrialized, since the 1970s and 80s. But the other thing is, a lot of the German businesses have instead moved to China. And when I throw that on LinkedIn, people start calling Germany a bunch of traitors, this, that, and the other thing. It's the United States sanctions. The term traitors, or people can accuse each other of that. That's a two-way street. So here, the question over the summer was, if Germany defects from using the Nord Stream pipelines, then that might tempt all the German-speaking countries from defecting and leaving the U.S. petrodollar. then you'd start to look at all the Slavic and Danube River countries, Czech, Slovakia, well, Hungary's Magyars, but Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria. So the United States is afraid that since, like that map shows on the right, since Germany has such a really dense oil and gas pipeline network, that if Nord Stream went through, Germany can become the hub of all of Central and Eastern Europe and to reverse flow. So if Germany left the petrodollar and traded in euros for rubles, then 6 to 10 other countries could join, and the petrodollar would just collapse. So the protests in the German world and Danube River countries were experiencing increased costs. The protests and the riots started to increase. We'll go to the next slide. Yeah, as I wrote on LinkedIn days after the pipeline blew up, the United States is the country that was most adversely affected because if 6 to 10 Central European countries exit the petrodollar all at the same time, well, that means the integration between North America and Western Europe is over. The petrodollar trading system is over. And that really does mean that the global center of political gravity would have really shifted towards Berlin and Moscow. That would be really bad for the United States. They already had to defeat by having to pull out of Afghanistan. If that were to happen, that would be 2 crushing blows to the Biden administration. So they're trying to do anything to stop that. Pipeline blew up. Make your own. The audience can make up their own conclusions. But yeah, so the goal is here, maintain a global audience captured to the petrodollar today is much more significant at the present levels of debt than in 2001 at the beginning of GWAT, global war on terror. Some people have argued that the U.S. invaded Iraq when Saddam and Bashar al-Assad in Syria wanted to trade in euros and gold instead of the petrodollar. And in that system, the oil that went through the Baghdad through Damascus pipeline was at issue there. Going to slide 30. That argument gained traction as Gaddafi was coincidentally attacked when he discussed trading in oil and natural gas in Italy across the Mediterranean and cutting out the petrodollar Wall Street middleman. Oh yeah, then the argument perpetuated because then the Free Syrian Army arose during the regime change strategy to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Funding started going through Sunni-backed groups. Then Al-Qaeda working through Jabhat al-Nusra, and Al-Qaeda in Iraq became ISIS, well, ISIL, then ISIS. So coincidentally, when the regime change, Arab Spring started in Syria, all of a sudden Al-Qaeda and ISIS comes back to life. So a lot of people say, well, the United States agency supported that. I had on the slide above that, the shows that the Gray Zone did on that. Aaron Matei and Max Blumenthal discussed that a lot of their shows. There's other shows also that talk about that, especially my interpreters who are watching, they're watching news in Arabic, of course, and in Turkish and Farsi. So there's lots of cooperative information on that.
George, I'm going to have to cut you short right there because we just had some technical difficulties, so I'm going to have to stop recording very soon, and we will upload this and the next one coming up immediately.